Kia ora koutou. Welcome to HR Chats with me, Te Radar, where we chat all things HR and HR related. Today, neuroinclusion. Some insights, some challenges, and most importantly, some practical support. We're about to have a practical conversation on why neurodiversity matters for organisations. What have we learnt from the research? What are the challenges that companies face and the steps that they can take to support their neurodivergent employees? And I have two excellent guests today. We have Dana Ott, who is a senior lecturer in international management at the excellent University of Otago. Made me the man I am today. Dana's research seeks to enhance global mobility experiences for individuals pursuing international careers and to provide guidance for organisations in effectively supporting neurodivergent employees and leaders. Deeply committed to advancing DEI initiatives and particularly in championing neuroinclusion. It's a difficult sentence, particularly championing neuroinclusion, fostering cultural intelligence and promoting gender equity. Kia ora, Dana, how are you?
Kia ora, thanks. Doing good down here in Dunedin.
Doing good. That's a great sentence, isn't it? Championing neuro inclusion. It's a hard one to say.
Yes, yes, it's a hard one to do sometimes too.
Look, there's a metaphor in there somewhere as well. And also, we have Miriam Moeller as well, Associate Professor in International Business at the University of Queensland Business School in Australia. Miriam takes particular interest and regularly publishes about human resource management, global mobility, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. You may have seen some of her award winning work, which fosters social cohesion and drives economic productivity by promoting the development of neuro inclusive workplace practices in Australia and across the globe. Kia ora, Miriam, how are you?
Hello, well, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Great, and you're coming to us, I think, today from sunny Brisbane.
That's correct. Sunny Brisbane,
Look,
265 days of sunshine per year.
It's it's arguably too many days of sunshine, and I think you've probably made Dana down in Dunedin a little jealous.
That's my job.
It's your job. Hey, look, I'm going to start off at the very beginning, at the very basic thing. From Dana, if I was to say to you, what is neurodiversity?
Yeah.
What does it mean when we're speaking about it in this context?
Yeah, so I mean, great starting point. That's a really important question because we do need to make sure that, we're all on the same page and are all sort of coming to the same idea when we think about neurodiversity. I think most people have probably heard the term neurodiversity by now, particularly recently. We've been talking about it more and more. And some people, when they hear someone say neurodiversity, they think about a specific neurodivergence. So they might think autism or they might think ADHD. And in the same space, some people might have a lot of lived experience or personal experience with neurodiversity. Some might not, or some might think they don't, but they don't really know. So I think it's really important that we all understand that in the very simplest way possible, neurodiversity is brain differences. So it's about people having brains that function differently. But it's also about the fact that those differences in brain functioning are natural variations among the human population. So I would say, yes, neurodivergent individuals' brains, they function in ways that diverge from, let's say, societal's expectations of normal, if we say there is actually such a thing as normal. But that's not a bad thing. That's a natural thing, right? And that natural variation is a good thing. There's no right way that people need to learn or need to think about things. So instead, what neurodiversity really argues is that we need to be embracing these differences in cognitive thinking, and that when we do that, people and societies really benefit, and we start to really appreciate individuals as talents and what they can bring to organizations and to the workforce. So essentially, neurodiversity, we're moving away from a deficits-based sort of perspective, and we're moving towards a strengths-based lens when we start thinking about those differences and what individuals can bring. People and researchers really commonly refer to autism, ADHD, and dyslexia when they talk about neurodiversity. But there are a lot of different neurodivergence. And even recently, we've started referring to traumatic brain injuries, for example, and dementia as neurodivergence. So I guess kind of the point is that if we think about diverging from society's expectations of normal, there are lots of different developmental and acquired sort of differences that we could consider as a type of neurodivergence. And I said a lot, but I think I probably still missed something. So let me give it to Miriam to tell me what I missed.
What did she miss, Miriam?
Well, Dana does an excellent job providing the overview. There's a lot to be said, as a matter of fact. One of the things that I think we ought to point out early on, too, is that this idea of neurodivergence, in fact, impacts a lot of people, okay? So when we look at the research, we're actually looking at between 15 to 20% of the world's population being neurodivergent. So a quick math, right? Let's do some math here. We're at about 8.1 billion people. Let's take 15 to 20% of that. We're looking at 1.2 to 1.6 billion people in the world, and they live everywhere, right? Yeah. And so, we could break that down even further. Some research tells us that when we look at autistic individuals, that impacts maybe around 1 to 3% of the population in the world. We're looking at dyslexia, all of a sudden we're looking at 3 to 6%, Tourette's less than 1. So there's all these variations, and we simply don't know enough about each of them.
Does it vary across cultures, the way that it is manifests or is dealt with within societies? Is there a cultural background to some of this as well?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Radar. This is one of Dana's and my passions, since we both have a background in global mobility, and we've lived and traveled across the world, for the past 2 decades at least. So one of the things that we really have great ambitions to do is to study what neurodiversity means across the world, right? We can't just stop in Australia or in New Zealand. We want to know, is there a term for neurodiversity in Mozambique? What is it in Sweden, in Peru, in Indonesia? What does neurodiversity mean to that society, right? How is it treated in the healthcare domain? How is it treated in the education space? And of course, what Dana and I have been looking at for several years now is, how does it manifest in the workplace? And across all those spaces, there's a lot of work to do. Push aside all kinds of cultural nuances. Lots of work to do. Lots.
A lot of work to do, which is why we're here today. So specifically, Dana, neurodiversity in organizations. Why are we talking about that not only today, but more generally?
Yeah, well, I think so. So as Miriam said, for a few years now, we've been presenting in different locations to different audiences, talking about neurodiversity. And this is often one of those questions that we're sort of trying to make sure we make really clear. So I think probably the easiest, the best way we've been able to explain why we need to be talking about neurodiversity within organizations is if I give you a really, really simple example, and it's intentionally very, very, very simple. But imagine for a minute that you're employed by an organization and everybody in that organization uses their left hand. And you're right hand dominant, right? You prefer to write and do everything with your right hand. And you show up to work and the organization basically says, look, it's easier, it's cheaper, we can be more consistent if we just have everybody use their left hand. So please make sure that you use your left hand, right? Well, for you, that means that it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to do the things you need to do. You might not be able to be quite as creative or innovative as you would like to be. And ultimately, your performance isn't going to be as strong as it could be. Now, if you could just use your right hand, you'd be faster, you'd be better, you'd be more comfortable every single day when you come to the office and every single day when you go to work. And you also probably know that you might be faster and better than a lot of people that are using their left hand. So from an organization's perspective, why wouldn't they allow you to use your right hand? It's those kind of small adjustments that will increase someone's comfort, will increase their performance, will increase the potential, creativity that they can bring to the job. And when you do that, you benefit the individual, but you also benefit the entire organization. So everybody gets that benefit out of it. And it's really those small adjustments that we really have to reframe in the organizational context to thinking about them as performance enhancing techniques, right? They're little things that organizations can do that just make people feel more comfortable and eventually influences their performance.
Miriam, what is any really good examples of just really simple things that you've seen done in a workplace, or indeed something that you've seen done which was maybe very challenging for an organization, but once it was implemented, it made a world of difference?
Absolutely. So Dana and I published a piece in this is called MIT Sloan. It's a practitioner outlet. It's a couple of years ago now. And the reason why we wrote this piece on supporting neurodivergent employees is because we were absolutely frustrated with the conversations we've been having with, HR professionals, employees in general, our colleagues, our students, everyone we talked to said, in terms of the neurodivergence, some of the things we're doing in HR right now simply don't work for the neurodivergent community. So we wrote this piece, long story short, you can certainly read it offline. But we looked at every single phase of the employee life cycle, from attraction to selection, onboarding, performance management, all the way through retention. And we said, if we were to make this life cycle more neuro-inclusive, what would that in fact look like? And one of my favorite things, one of my favorite ideas that's come to the forefront is during that selection phase, where typically when we're at that point where we bring in somebody for the interview, we all get a little bit nervous with these interviews, and we try to prepare as best as possible. Why don't we send the interview questions 24, 48 hours in advance? What is the matter with doing that? We don't always have to do things the way we've always done them. We have to break down our assumptions and say, what are we getting out of that interview anyway? Is that really allowing this person to showcase their strengths? And more often than not, by asking these questions on the spot, the answer is no, it doesn't. It just shows how well they make eye contact. And some people don't make eye contact very well. And then we talk about masking and burnout. And before we know it, they don't get the job. And we're looking at extremely high unemployment rates, which is why Dana and I are doing the work that we're doing.
Yes, and it is there's a lot of it. So what was it that was the spark for the two of you to become involved in studying and researching this? I mean, there's a lot of options out there, and you've chosen this pursuit. Was there a little crucial moment where you went, oh, I'm going to do that?
I think, well, Miriam touched on it already a little bit. I think it was, what was it, 5 or 6 years ago, Miriam, that we sat down and said, okay, there's definitely this gap. Just like Miriam said, we were talking to lots of people and we definitely identified that there was this gap. And so we sat down and said, all right, we're academics. What do academics do? We go read stuff. So we went and tried to find everything we could read about neurodiversity in organizations within sort of mainstream, let's say, human resources and management literature, right? The organizational stuff. And we couldn't find hardly anything. It was almost completely absent of literature that's really talked about what organizations are doing, what's happening in organizations. So I think that was probably the moment that sort of sparked us to say, there isn't much out there. There isn't a lot of guidance. And we know, as Miriam said, this is 15 to 20% of the global population. We're talking about every single organization. If they have more than 5 or 6 employees, it is highly likely that they have some employees who are neurodivergent. And there's very little guidance and very little information out there from a research perspective. So I think that's probably what kicked us off. But Miriam's also right. The unemployment and underemployment rates are so high among neurodivergent individuals. So unemployment, we're looking at 30 to 40% is pretty common. Underemployment, so people being employed in roles and positions where their skills, their abilities, their capabilities aren't really being utilized, or they're not in a position to be able to utilize those capabilities. That's closer to 40 or 50%. And that's really common globally, worldwide. Yeah. So, talent's being missed. And was probably what really sparked us to say, hey, we've got to do something here.
Yeah. I wonder, we're seeing a lot of people now going in and they're thinking to themselves, something's difficult, and they've got quite late stage diagnosis, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and it's life changing for them. So we're talking about a huge number of people out there who may not even be aware that their neurodivergence is causing them an issue within a workplace, I suppose, or indeed within their lives. I suppose the question is, a lot of these things that are instigated for people who state, "Hey, look, this is where I am," are going to benefit a whole lot of other people as well.
Absolutely. So what we're seeing right now is people forget organizations for a moment. It's the people who make up the organizations, right? People are struggling, regardless of whether in the neurotypical, I'm not sure I like that word. Maybe we'll come up with a
Yeah,
new one, but the neurotypical people or the neurodivergent people. By the way, we are all, let's put another definition out there. We are all neurodiverse. Okay, so regardless of whether I call myself neurotypical or not, I'm still part of a neurodiverse workforce. We're all different. But back to the point that people are struggling, and you're absolutely right. There's some research that suggests that women, especially, get diagnosed later in life because we're seeing that women, or girls are much better at masking. So when we apply the diagnostics to this cohort, which by the way is based on data from boys and men, they're getting misdiagnosed, and that's not very good, is it? Because then we see people who are struggling. They're obviously bringing with them into the workplaces a history as well. You never know how someone experienced their schooling, their previous workplace, and all that needs to be more or less managed right in there, which is a lot of pressure, mind you,
yeah,
on the organization, on HR, on the colleagues, on the leaders. And I also want to point out that there are neurodivergent leaders, there are neurodivergent followers, neurotypical leaders, neurotypical followers. So when we start looking at these dyads and the complexities of how people communicate, what their preferences are, their strengths, it's quite overwhelming to think about it. And again,
yeah,
pushing that cultural nuance aside and any other intersectionality matter. Like I said earlier, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to start putting some real
yeah.
great research, scientific rigor behind this to understand what our organizations are doing, what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and then we need to use our creativity and start doing better.
Yeah. The language is important, isn't it? When we're talking about, because in a way we don't want to be othering people by saying that you fit into the neurodiverse. Uh, How important is it for organizations to be really careful around how they phrase initiatives, I suppose, how they recruit, how they refer to people within the organization?
Dana, do you want this one, or we can share it?
Yeah,
You can
we can
share it.
share it. You go first. What do you think,
So,
Miriam?
yeah. Well, I'm thinking in terms of language in a very simplistic way, and I've made this mistake many, many times over, and I'm still catching myself sometimes. Let's say a new colleague walks through the door. Her name's Lisa, and okay, we say, Lisa has autism. No, 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 no. Well, that is right, but if you're talking through a medical model lens, right? If somebody has autism, it means that autism is happening to them and that it is something that we need to fix or medicate or cure. Dana and our work's really based on the social model or biopsychosocial model lens or perspective, where we're saying Lisa doesn't have autism. Lisa is autistic. It is part of her identity. Or Lisa is an ADHDer. She doesn't have autism. It's part of her identity. We just need to understand it. We would like to understand it. We want to work with it. We want to see what the strengths are, the challenges, and then proceed with what our goals are in the organization, right? So from a
Yeah.
very simple language perspective, the is and the has can make a huge difference. But one last phrase here. We have come across plenty of people in our research, because we do a lot of interviews, who we ask, what do you prefer? And they say, well, some of them say, I don't actually have a preference, as long as you treat the term and the idea and the concept with kindness and respect. Right?
Yeah.
And we accept that.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty challenging for individuals and especially for organizations. What's been the most challenging thing, I suppose, for organizations that you've encountered or dealt with?
Yeah. I think I would say one of the biggest challenges that organizations face directly relates to what we're talking about right now in language use, or just this general fear of getting it wrong. And this fear of getting it wrong or not doing it in exactly the right way, that's often leads to sort of hesitation or inaction or just not getting started. So I think that's one of the challenges that many organizations face, is just not wanting to jump in and get things done wrong. Of course, Miriam and I would say, hey, academics are here. That's what we're here for. We can help you to make sure that you don't get it wrong. But I think the other thing I would say is there's this pretty strong myth out there that we hear quite a lot, and that's that offering adjustments or accommodations or supports, whatever word you want to call it, is going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to mean a whole lot of change, and people aren't going to be happy about it, and it's going to take a long time. And I guess we would say that's just simply not true. Most accommodations actually are free or are very low cost. In fact, the ones that most neurodivergent individuals request are flexible work options. So whether it's flexible hours or flexible locations, so things like remote working as well. And the other one is related to sort of sensory aspects. So they have preferences for things that could slightly be changed in their sensory environment that would just allow them to concentrate better, to do their work better. So it's just this assumption or feeling that if we start doing things that align with neuroinclusion, it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to mean a lot of change. And that's simply not true.
Yeah. So for an organization that is sitting there and thinking, oh, what are we going to do now? A first step, and then as they graduate on, any sort of place they can go to for resources, for help, for advice, anything like that?
Mm-hmm. I can jump in here, Dana, if that's all right. I'd like to shine a light on an organization here. I like role models. Right? If we have somebody that does it well already, we can look to them and say, well, what are they doing? And can I replicate this for my organization? And one of the organizations that I personally admire in Australia is called Australian Spatial Analytics, or in short, ASA. Which is a non-for-profit work integrated social enterprise, and they are into these geospatial engineering services. Now, what's unique about this WISE organization, work integrated social enterprise, is that they in fact hire that 80% of their workforce is neurodivergent. Okay, so across the spectrum, and they are doing some magnificent work. They're getting recognition. In fact, the CEO of the organization was named the Queensland pick for Australian of the Year. So the conversation there is really ripe. And I think if we look to those organizations that are not necessarily classified as the typical organization, that we can learn a lot from them. Yeah.
You're right.
Another thing I would probably suggest that organizations think about doing tomorrow, right? Things that they can do immediately, that they can put in place. One of those things is finding a quiet, low sensory space within the organization that can be accessible to everyone. This is a very common request that's made, is having this, space where people know that they can go, they can decompress, they can concentrate, they can just relax for a moment. It's low sensory, so they just have that opportunity to kind of have a quiet moment. That's one of the main first steps that's really, really easy that many organizations can put into place tomorrow. So I think if I was going to go out and suggest something right away, that would be one of them. The other thing I just want to mention quickly is a lot of organizations are starting to introduce employee resource groups that are specifically aimed at providing sort of that community, that support, that awareness space where both neurodivergent individuals and allies can come together and talk about what kind of things could make the organization more comfortable, what kind of things could we be doing different here. And I would just say that's fantastic, and it's wonderful to have those employee resource groups, but they also really need to be supported as well. And so it's not just about finding those few individuals and saying, hey, go and take care of everything that needs to be done in the neuroinclusion space. It's actually about supporting them, empowering them, and making sure that organizations are working with them as well.
So it's definitely not easy. Go ahead, Radar.
Well, I was going to segue very nicely. I think, Miriam, you've recently designed an Autism Employment Playbook, which people could immediately, I suppose, access or download.
That's right. It's a free resource. And so Dana and I are part of a larger research team across Australia and New Zealand. And as we said many times throughout this podcast now, is we were frustrated, and frustration is a really good motivator to get work done, frustrated by those unemployment rates and underemployment rates. So the universe speaks to us, right? And several pieces of the puzzle come together. And what we ended up doing was we looked into, and we wanted to study the experiences of autistic job seekers in Queensland at that point in time. But not just any autistic job seeker. We were looking at the experiences of those who were accessing disability employment services, right? So what we did is we really wanted to hear the voices of the autistic job seekers first and foremost, because that's the voice that sometimes gets subdued, right? So we wanted to hear those first. We also then interviewed the disability employment services providers and some of the employers that the autistic job seekers ended up working with. And it was a 18-month project, wasn't it, Dana? And at the end, we published what we now call the Autism Playbook, Autism Employment Playbook. And what it does, in short, is it creates a whole new level or layer of transparency for all parties involved in that job seeking process. 15 steps. We make recommendations for each party at every single step of the way. We tried to make this, we did make this as neuro-inclusive as possible. We even used or provided a simple language version, checklists, so that every job seeker, every service provider, every employer, can sit down, open up the book and say, step one, what do I do now? And it takes a whole lot of energy out of the equation if you don't have to think about how you reinvent the processes that you do, on autopilot all the time. So it's a really nice tool. We've had some great feedback.
Yeah, very helpful. I suppose one of the most important things is not to put everyone into that neurodiversity basket, because the spectrum really is a spectrum, and you've got a whole lot of people across a whole lot of ranges. How important is it for organisations to make sure that they cover that wide spectrum? Because it's easy to say, oh, we've got an autism plan, or we've got an ADHD plan, or whatever it may be, or is there a lot of crossover between them?
I think generally what we would suggest or recommend is always that organizations get to know individuals, right? So when we talk about, even when we sit down sort of long term and start thinking about job descriptions and what people are doing on a regular basis, we talk about using things like job carving, where you can sit down and start to think about what aspects of a job actually someone might not be as comfortable at doing, or maybe they don't really have to do it in that particular role, and how we can sort of carve up different jobs and just make those individualized opportunities available to each employee within the organization. That's probably long term. I would say if we're talking about sort of what kind of supports, again, accommodations we can put in place, yes, we can standardize workplace adjustments, particularly those ones that are asked for most frequently. And I think Miriam and I could sit here all day and list off lots of different ones that would be really helpful, but just a few of them. I already mentioned the flexible remote working, but it's also, put some thought into that sensory environment within your organization, offering that low sensory space that everybody can access, putting some practices in place around communication, and making sure and offering that we always have everything communicated in writing and verbally. If we're going to have a meeting about something, it's always followed up with some kind of written information. Also providing opportunities for people to sit back and think about things that were discussed, and then have that opportunity to come and give feedback later. Oftentimes we want feedback now, right away in this moment, and we don't give people that little bit of extra space to actually think about it, and come back and give that sort of feedback later. So I guess you might already be thinking, hey, these are things that could help everybody. And they are things that can help everybody. Doing these kind of things and standardizing them in the workplace and thinking about what are our workplace expectations. Like Miriam said, make it transparent. make it so everybody knows, make it very explicit. What are the kind of things that we want to have be regular interactions or communication policies within the organization? And just doing those things are going to be helpful for everybody, regardless of neurodivergence, regardless of being neurotypical.
It's a win-win-win. Oh, it's an
Yes.
all-round win. I tell you what, there's an awful lot going on in this field. As you say, when you started looking into it, there wasn't a lot of research out there. There wasn't a lot of conversation around this. So what next for you? Where are you going to spend the next little part of your focus on this? What are you going to do?
Well, I briefly
Miriam, yeah.
mentioned earlier that we are highly interested in studying neurodiversity across borders. And what that means for us initially is we still want to study the experiences first and foremost before we move on to practices, policies, and larger strategic issues. But gee, wouldn't it be great to understand the population that's moving across the world for work purposes, those expatriates that we keep referring to, send someone from Sydney to Stockholm, Sweden. They may have, 3 children, and 2 of the children were just recently diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And so what does that mean? Well, is Sweden set up to support this? If not, I think the expatriate might just question whether this is a 3 to 4 year move that they wish to undertake. So
Yeah.
we want to explore that further, plus obviously also look into what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. And I think that's where I'm going to throw it back to you, Dana. What's going to happen in the next few weeks here?
Let's
Right.
bring it back to us. What are we doing, Dana? What's going on?
Right. Well, I know what Miriam and I are going to be doing. So I'm going to be hosting Miriam over here in New Zealand at the beginning of October. We are going to be doing some presentations in Auckland and in Dunedin. So if you're interested, definitely have a look at the HRNZ website. You can register to come along and have a deeper chat both about the Autism Employment Playbook and about what Miriam and I are getting up to. So, so I think that's our shameless plug moment.
Shameless. And did you choose October because you're out of the cold Dunedin winter season and you were concerned about Miriam perhaps, being a little cold? It's a great part of the world.
I
Dana,
don't have a
Dunedin.
winter wardrobe right now.
You don't?
We had to
Well,
wait.
there's
No, I live in Queensland.
just a lot of light summer frocks. Hey, look, final question. What has been the most surprising thing, one thing from each of you, where you just went, wow, didn't expect that, or I've never seen that before, or what an awesome thing this is? From all of the research that you've seen. It doesn't have to be academic, it doesn't have to be organizational, something around neurodiversity. I've put you on the spot.
For me, it was the prevalence. It's the one, I can read the research and I see 15 to 20%, and I know why that's there. But as soon as you tell people you're researching neurodiversity, people that start talking to you about neurodiversity, whether it's their second cousin removed, whether it's their child, whether it's they themselves. It is a conversation starter, and the prevalence, the abundance of neurodiversity, and people wishing to speak about it and understand it themselves, and wishing that organizations would understand it better, is huge, for lack of better words. It's enormous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Dana.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a wonderful one, Miriam, and you're absolutely right. Anytime you say anything about doing research in this space, you've got a lot of people that want to come and have a chat, and there's often that personal connection to it. I think the other thing is, Miriam's mentioned about the cultural thing. So I was at a conference not long ago, and we started the discussion. We had people from, I don't know, some 20 different countries there. And sort of one of the first things I asked was, so what's the word for neurodiversity or for autism in your native language? And I think that was a real eye-opener for me, just to see such different perspectives about how we think about neurodiversity and what it means for people, and just those massive differences across those cultural boundaries. So I think that's why it's really important for organizations in New Zealand, to work with researchers in New Zealand, and in Australia to work with people that are in Australia, so that we can help out with understanding within your context what it means. But then also we can take that step back and look sort of globally and say, well, is there somewhere we can draw sort of meaning and understanding that might actually be a better way to represent what neurodiversity should mean here or there or in that organization?
Brilliant. Miriam, Dana, thank you very much. This has been fair. I could continue to talk for hours and hours about this, which probably says as much about me as it does about your very fascinating topic. If you want to hear more from Miriam or Dana, you want some of the research, you can Google them, or you can have a look. HRNZ will have some of the resources, I'm sure. And of course, they have got those sessions coming up soon in Auckland and Dunedin. Hey, look, it has been excellent. As always, a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. From me, Tarada. This has been HR Chats. If there is anything at all that you wish us to talk about in HR Chats, then feel free to get hold of the HRNZ people. There's a huge back catalogue of content as well. So until next time, many thanks. All the best. Go out there, make a difference. A little bit of a better world for not only people in your organisations, you never know, it might make the world better for you as well. Take care.